In C++, a class can also have multiple base classes. This is referred to as multiple inheritance. A great example of this is the IOStream class that we talked about in the previous part of the course. So IOStream has two parents, iStream and OStream, and that is why it gives us both reading and writing capability. Now here the diagram has a problem because we need another arrow from IOStream towards OStream. But that aside, let's see how we can implement something like this from scratch. So back to our project, let's add a new class. I'm going to call this file reader. So in this class, we can implement the capability to read from a file. Now in this demo, we don't want to get distracted with all that complexity. So let's just focus on implementing multiple inheritance. So here in the public section, I want to add a method that returns a string called read. Now to save time, I'm going to implement this method right here, even though we shouldn't do this in real life applications. We talked about this many times before. So I just want to return hello world. Now let's include the string header file and use the std namespace. Okay, now let's add another class called file writer. Now again, for simplicity, I just want to implement a method right here. So the write method that takes some content, and here we can use cout to print the content on the terminal. Now let's include the IOStream header file and use the std namespace. So here we have two classes. Now we can combine these two into a new class called file.io. So let's add a new class called file.io. Now here, first we need to include file reader and file writer. Now, just like before, here we type a colon, followed by an access modifier, which is public most of the time, and then the name of the base class, so file reader. Then we repeat with file writer. As simple as that. Now here we can have additional members. We don't really need them for this demo. So let's see how we can create a file.io object. So we go to our main function. Now on the top, we include file.io. Here we create a file.io object. Now when we use the dot operator, we can see all the members of both base classes. This is multiple inheritance. Now let's take this to the next level and make it a little bit more complicated. So let's go to the file reader class and add a constructor that takes a string parameter. So file reader, string file name. Now again, to save time, I'm going to implement this right here. So here we just want to print constructor of file reader followed by endo. Now let's include the IOStream header file. Good. Now we need the same constructor in the file writer class. So paste it. We just need to change file reader to file writer. Okay. Now if you go to our main function, we get a compilation error saying call to implicitly deleted default constructor of file.io. So in this case, the compiler cannot generate a default constructor for us because both base classes of file.io require an argument in their constructor. So the compiler doesn't know what to pass to these base classes. So here we need to go to the file.io class and explicitly define a constructor. So this constructor also takes a string parameter called file name. Now I'm going to implement this here as well. So here we can type a colon and pass this argument to the constructor of these base classes. So first we pass it to file reader, then we add a comma and pass this to the constructor of file writer. Okay, now back to our main function. When creating this object, we need to pass some file name. Now the error goes away. Now let's take this to the next level and make it a little bit more complicated. So let's go to our file reader class. Let's add a new method here for returning the file name. So string file name, and here we just return some value. It doesn't really matter. Now let's add this method to the file writer class as well. So over here, we just paste this. So now we have two implementations of this method. Now here's a question for you. which implementation do you think we're going to have in the file.io class? We're going to have both implementations. So if we go to our main function and try to call file.filename, we get a compilation error because here we have both implementations of the file name, so the compiler doesn't know which implementation we need to call. So if we have members by the same name that we have inherited from multiple classes, we need to explicitly reference them using their base class. So here we type FileReader : to call the implementation in the FileReader class. So this is all about multiple inheritance. In reality, you shouldn't use this technique that often because again, you might end up creating a complex inheritance hierarchy. So all the problems we talked about in the previous lesson will come back and bite you. All right, now I want you to create a class called date with 3 attributes: year, month, and day. In this class, we need a constructor with 3 parameters and 3 getters for getting the value of these attributes. So this class is immutable, meaning once we create a date object, we cannot change it. We only have getters, no setters, okay? Also, be sure to validate the arguments of the constructor so we cannot create an invalid date. Once you do this, then create a new class called time with 3 attributes: hour, minute, and second. Similarly, here we have a constructor with 3 parameters and 3 getters. Again, make sure to validate the arguments of the constructor so we cannot create an invalid time. Once you implement these classes, then combine the two into a new class called datetime.